There is a strange economy to masculine power that most men never learn to see. It operates beneath language, beneath fairness, beneath who was right or wrong in any given moment. You can watch it collapse in real time if you know what to look for. A text message sent too quickly, a voice that rises half an octave when challenged, a man explaining himself to someone who has already stopped listening. The pattern is always the same. He was right about the facts, right about the principle, right about what was said or promised or implied, and yet something in the room shifted, something in her eyes changed. The respect didn't return, it drained further. He won the argument and lost something far more important, something he didn't even know was on the table. He lost frame, he lost sovereignty, he lost the quiet, untouchable gravity that makes a man's presence feel like architecture instead of weather. And the cruelest part is this: he will do it again tomorrow, because he still believes that being right is what matters. He still believes that reaction proves strength. I work with men who have spent years inside this trap. Men who can articulate exactly why their ex-partner was unfair, why the situation was unreasonable, and why they were justified in their anger, hurt, or defensiveness. They are not wrong, but they are alone. They are confused, and they keep ending up in the same position, facing different women in different cities with the same inexplicable outcome. They presented their case, they proved their point, they stood their ground, and they lost anyway. Not because the other person won, but because they entered a game they didn't understand, playing by rules that don't govern the outcome. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this with a clarity that still makes people uncomfortable 5 centuries later. He watched men lose power not because they lacked virtue or intelligence or righteousness, but because they fundamentally misread the nature of the game being played. They brought sincerity to a theater of perception. They brought logic to a war of frames. And they died with clean consciences and empty hands. This is not about manipulation. This is not about becoming cold or calculating or dishonest. This is about understanding a law of power so fundamental that ignoring it doesn't make you virtuous. It makes you a casualty. The law is this: the man who reacts has already placed the frame of the interaction outside himself. He has made himself the defendant. And once you are defending, you are losing, no matter how correct your defense may be. The strongest position a man can occupy is the one where his reality does not require explanation, does not bend under questioning, does not flinch when tested. The woman who respects him does so not because he won a debate, but because he did not need to enter it. The world that yields to him does so not because he was loud or aggressive or unyielding, but because he moved through it as if the frame was his by nature, and her reaction, her test, her provocation was simply whether he did not dignify with commentary. By the end of this, you will understand exactly why reaction destroys you even when you are right, and what it quietly costs you every single time you forget. Machiavelli lived in a world where power was visible and violent, where the stakes of misreading a situation were exile, imprisonment, and death. He served the Florentine Republic during its final gasp of independence, watched it collapse, watched its men of great intelligence and noble intention lose everything because they did not understand that power is not a reward for virtue. It is a position you occupy or fail to occupy. The Prince was written not as a guide to cruelty, but as a map of reality for men who could not afford illusions. And one of his deepest observations, threaded through every chapter, is this: the moment you explain yourself, the moment you justify, the moment you react to an accusation or a challenge as if you owe an answer, you have conceded the only thing that mattered. You have conceded a frame. You have agreed that someone else gets to set the terms of your reality. The modern man lives in a softer world, but the principle has not changed. He simply cannot see it operating because the consequences are not swords and sieges, they are subtler. A woman's attraction is fading, a quiet loss of respect that she herself cannot articulate, a relationship that started with fire and becomes a slow, inexplicable descent into duty and resentment. The man cannot trace the collapse back to any one catastrophic event. He was kind, he was honest, he defended himself when attacked, he tried to communicate, he explained his boundaries, his feelings, and his perspective, and somehow in the very act of doing so, he became smaller. The thesis that governs this script, the spine that Machiavelli would recognize instantly, is this: a man who reacts to every test, every provocation, every challenge to his frame, trains the world to see him as something that can be moved, and what can be moved cannot be respected. It can be managed, it can be tolerated, it can even be loved in the way you love a child, but it cannot be respected. Let me show you what this looks like in the flesh. A man is dating a woman. It is early, still electric, still full of potential. She texts him something designed to provoke, a comment about another man, a withdrawal of warmth, a subtle accusation wrapped in a question. She does this not out of malice, but out of instinct, out of the same testing mechanism that every woman carries, whether she is conscious of it or not. She is asking, does this man's reality bend when I apply pressure? Most men, good men, men who have been taught to communicate and be vulnerable and explain themselves, will respond immediately. They will defend. They will clarify. They will explain why she misunderstood, why the situation is not what she thinks, and why they are not the kind of man she's implying. And in that moment, in the very speed and emotion of the reaction, they have answered her question. Yes, his reality bends. He is reactive. He can be moved, and her attraction, which was never about fairness or facts or who was right, begins to drain like water from a cracked ball. Compare this to the man she will later think about in quiet moments, the one she could never quite control. He was not rude, he was not colder, he was not more attractive on paper, but when she tested him, when she sent the same kind of provocation, he did not react, he did not defend, he did not explain. He saw the test for what it was and refused to participate. Maybe he responded hours later, calmly, with no emotion. Maybe he responded with humor, deflecting the frame entirely. Maybe he did not respond at all, and, in his non-reaction, in the steadiness of his reality, she felt something she could not manufacture through logic or fairness or negotiation. She felt his frame. She felt that he was not a man whose inner world could be shaken by her moods, her provocations, her attempts to destabilize him. And that immovability, that refusal to be moved, created in her what reaction never can: respect, curiosity, the kind of attraction that does not fade when convenience does. Machiavelli writes in The Prince, and I paraphrase here with precision, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both, because love is sustained by a bond of obligation which, being men as they are, is broken whenever personal advantage suggests it, but fear is sustained by a dread of punishment which never fails." He is not speaking only of political power. He is speaking of the frame. He is saying that the man who requires the other person's validation, the other person's agreement, the other person's love to hold his reality together, has placed his power in their hands, and hands open when it is advantageous to do so. But the man who holds his frame independently, who does not need her to agree, who does not need her to understand, who does not need her to approve, has placed his power in the only hands that will never betray him, his own. This does not mean cruelty. It means sovereignty. It means you do not defend what does not require defense. Another example, because the pattern is everywhere once you see it. A man is in a relationship, years deep. She criticizes something about him, his career, his body, his choices, the way he spends his time. It is not kind, it may not even be fair, but it is spoken, and now he must respond. Most men will do one of two things. They will explain why she is wrong, why the criticism is unfair, and why she does not understand the full picture. Or they will absorb it, apologize, promise to change, internalize the shame, and begin the long, quiet process of becoming smaller to fit her preferences. Both responses are reactive. Both are losses. Both train her, at a level beneath her conscious awareness, that he is a man who can be moved by her words. And both destroy attraction in a way that no amount of communication or therapy or vulnerability can repair, because attraction is not built on fairness. It is built on immovability. The sovereign response, the response Machiavelli would recognize, is to refuse the frame entirely, to hear the criticism and remain unmoved, not defensive, not apologetic, just unmoved, to let her words exist in a space between you without rushing to fill that space with explanation or justification, to allow her to feel her own emotion without making it your responsibility to manage. This is not coldness, this is clarity. You are not responsible for her feelings, you are responsible for your frame, and your frame does not require her approval to remain intact. If the criticism has merit, you consider it privately, on your own time, and make changes because you have decided to, not because she demanded it. If the criticism does not have merit, you let it dissolve in the air like smoke. You do not argue with smoke. You do not append yourself against the weather. and in your refusal to react, you communicate something that words never can. You communicate that your reality is not up for negotiation. Let me take you inside the mind of the man who loses this game, because the collapse does not happen all at once. It happens in stages, in tiny concessions that feel reasonable at the time, in moments of reactivity that seem justified in isolation. The man begins with good intentions. He wants to be understood. He wants to be fair. He wants the woman he cares about to see him clearly, to know that he is not the villain she is implying, not the disappointment she is suggesting. So when she tests him, when she withdraws warmth or questions his decisions, or implies he is failing in some subtle way, he reacts. He explains. He defends. He tries to pull her back into alignment with words, with logic, with emotional honesty. And at first it seems to work. She softens. The moment passes. He believes he has resolved the issue, but something deeper has shifted. She has learned unconsciously that his frame can be shaken, that his reality bends under pressure, that he is a man who needs her validation to feel secure. The second stage is justification. The tests increase in frequency and intensity because the first test revealed a crack. An instinct always probes a crack. She becomes more critical, more withdrawn, more prone to sudden coldness or accusation, and each time he justifies himself. He explains why he was late, why he made that choice, why he said that thing, and why he did not do the other thing she expected. He is not lying, he is not being manipulative. He is simply trying to close the gap between her perception and his reality. But every justification is an admission. Every explanation is a concession that she gets to set the terms, that her frame is the one that matters, that his worth is determined by whether he can satisfy her case against him. And so the respect continues to drain, not because she is cruel, but because biology does not respect what it can move. The third stage is self-abandonment. By now, the man has begun to change his behavior, not based on his own values or mission or sense of self, but based on avoiding her reactions. He stops seeing friends she does not approve of. He changes his schedule to accommodate her moods. He softens his opinions to avoid conflict. He apologizes for things he does not believe he did wrong, because the apology is easier than the reaction it prevents. He has become a man who lives in her frame, who moves through the world asking himself not what he wants or what is true or what serves his mission, but what will keep her calm, what will keep her happy, what will prevent the next test, the next withdrawal, the next cold silence. And at this point, the attraction is gone, not diminished, gone. Because she is no longer in the presence of a man. She's in the presence of a mirror that reflects her moods at her, a system she has learned to control, a frame she has successfully collapsed into her own. I once spoke to a man who could not understand why his wife had stopped touching him. They had been married for 6 years. He had done everything right. He had listened to her, supported her career, taken on more housework, become more emotionally available, attended therapy, and read the books she recommended. He had become, by every modern metric, a better partner, and yet the intimacy had died, not slowly. Suddenly, 1 year it was present, and the next it was not, and no amount of conversation or effort or vulnerability could resurrect it. When I asked him to describe a typical conflict, the pattern became immediately clear. She would criticize something, his tone, his priorities, the way he had handled a situation, and he would explain himself, calmly, articulately, with emotional intelligence. He would walk her through his reasoning, validate her feelings, apologize for any hurt he had caused, and commit to doing better. And she would soften. The conflict would be resolved, but the respect never returned. Because every time he explained himself, every time he defended his reality as if it required her approval, he trained her to see him as something that could be moved, and she could not desire what she could move. The man she had been attracted to, the man she married, had not been perfect. He had been difficult at times, stubborn, uncompromising in certain areas, but he had possessed something this newer, better version of him had lost. He had possessed a frame. He had not needed her to agree with him, to hold his reality. He had not bent under her moods. He had not treated her emotions as emergencies he was responsible for managing. And that immovability, that refusal to be moved, had created the tension that attraction requires. When he became the man she said she wanted, the man who explained and validated and apologized and adapted, he became the man she could no longer respect, not because she was broken or cruel, but because respect does not follow fairness. It follows the frame. Machiavelli would tell this man something uncomfortable. He would say, "You believed that love and respect were the same thing, and that both could be earned through virtue and effort and goodness. But they are not the same. Love is gratitude. Respect is recognition of power. And power is not something you earn by submitting to someone else's frame. It is something you hold by refusing to leave your own. The woman does not want you to become smaller. She wants to discover that she cannot make you smaller. And every time you react, every time you explain, every time you adjust yourself to avoid her discomfort, you rob her of that discovery. You train her to see you as manageable, and what is manageable cannot be desired. Zoom out now from the individual man to the system that produces him, because this pattern is not accidental. It is not a failure of character or intelligence. It is the predictable outcome of a culture that has systematically misled men about the nature of power, respect, and attraction. We live in an environment that tells men from boyhood onward that reaction is strength, that explaining yourself is maturity, that vulnerability is courage, that adapting to a woman's needs is love. And all of these things can be true in specific contexts, in relationships built on mutual respect and sovereign frames. But they become poison when applied as default strategies, when used as tools to earn respect rather than expressions of respect already present. The modern man has been taught to negotiate for something that cannot be negotiated. He has been taught to explain himself into desire, and it does not work. It has never worked. But the culture keeps selling the lie, because the lie is profitable and the truth is dangerous. Machiavelli wrote for princes navigating a world of visible power, where the cost of misreading the game was immediate and brutal. But the principles he articulated apply with equal force to the invisible economies of modern relationships, workplaces, and social hierarchies. The man who constantly defends himself, who explains his decisions, who seeks approval before acting, who bends his frame to accommodate every challenge, is the political equivalent of the prince who rules by committee, who makes decisions based on what will keep the nobles happy, who fears conflict more than defeat. And such a prince, Machiavelli observes, does not remain a prince for long. He is replaced, not by a tyrant, by someone who simply refuses to live in anyone else's frame. This extends beyond romantic relationships. Watch what happens to the man at work, who over-explains his decisions, who defends his choices to subordinates, and who allows his authority to be questioned without consequence. His position erodes, not because he is incompetent, but because he has trained the people around him to see his leadership as negotiable. Watch what happens to the man in his social circle who reacts to every joke, every challenge, every moment of disrespect with defense, explanation, or emotional display. He becomes the target, not because the group is cruel, but because groups instinctively test for weakness, and reaction is weakness made visible. The pattern is the same across every domain. Reaction is the signal that your frame is not sovereign, and what is not sovereign will be conquered, not through war, but through 1,000 small incursions you allow, because you believe that defending yourself is the same as protecting yourself. The cost of staying blind to this is not dramatic. You will not lose everything at once. You will simply become less respected, less desired, less free. You will spend more and more energy managing other people's perceptions, explaining yourself, defending your reality, and trying to pull people back into alignment with words. And you will be confused because you are a good man. After all, you are trying. After all, you are doing what you were told would work. But the exhaustion will grow. The relationships will feel hollow. The respect you once had or thought you had will quietly vanish, and you will not be able to trace it back to any single moment. You will just wake up one day and realize that you have become a stranger in your own life, moving through the world not according to your mission or your values or your frame, but according to the ever-shifting expectations of people who no longer see you as immovable. If a system demands your vulnerability but offers no protection, walking away is not cowardice, it is sovereignty. If a woman tests your frame and you feel the need to defend it, you have already lost it. If your reality requires explanation to exist, it is not your reality. These are not slogans, these are laws, and the man who learns them does not become cold. He becomes free, free from the exhausting cycle of reaction and defense, free from the need to be understood by people who have no interest in understanding him. free to move through the world with the quiet, immovable gravity that makes others adjust to him rather than the other way around. So what does sovereignty look like in practice without the comfortable distance of theory? It begins with noticing. Noticing the moment she says something designed to provoke, and noticing the tightness in your chest, the urge to explain, to defend, to correct her misunderstanding. That urge is not strong, it is fear. Fear that if you do not explain yourself, she will think less of you. Fear that your frame is not solid enough to withstand her questioning. And that fear is the crack. Sovereignty begins with allowing the urge to exist without obeying it. You feel the need to react, and you do not react. You let the comment sit in the air. You let her feel her own discomfort without rushing to resolve it. You respond, if you respond at all, only after the charge has dissipated. Only after you have decided what is true, not what will pacify her. Take the scenario of the text message. She sends something cold, something critical, something that implies you have failed her in some small way. The reactive man, the man operating inside her frame, responds immediately. He explains. He apologizes. He tries to repair. The sovereign man does something that feels, at first, almost cruel. He does nothing, not because he does not care, but because he recognizes the test for what it is. She is not asking for information. She is asking if his reality requires her approval to remain stable, and his silence, or his delayed response, or his calm acknowledgement without defense answers that question with clarity. No. His reality does not bend. She can be upset, she can withdraw, she can test, and his frame remains exactly where it was. And in that immovability, she feels something that words could never create. She feels that she is in the presence of a man who cannot be moved by moods. Another pattern, the argument where you are objectively right. She has misunderstood something, misrepresented what you said, or accused you of something you did not do. The default instinct is to correct the record, to prove your innocence, to make sure she knows the truth. But ask yourself, why do you need her to know? If you are secure in your reality, if your frame is sovereign, her misunderstanding is not a threat. It is simply her experience, which she is entitled to, and which does not require your management. The sovereign response is to let her be wrong, not in a punishing way, not with contempt, but with the calm recognition that you do not need her to agree with you for your reality to be valid. If she is important to you, if the relationship has value, you can address the misunderstanding later, when she is calm, when the frame is not contested. But you do not defend yourself in the heat of the moment. You do not react to the accusation as if it has the power to define you. Notice the micro-behavior of over-explaining. You tell her your plans and she reacts negatively. Immediately, you begin to justify. You explain why you made that choice, why it is important, and why it does not mean what she thinks it means. Stop. Every word you add is a concession that her frame matters more than yours. The sovereign man states his reality once, clearly, and then stops talking. He does not fill the silence with justification. He allows her to react, to be upset, to disagree, and he remains unmoved. Not because he does not care about her feelings, but because he understands that managing her feelings is not his responsibility. His responsibility is to hold his frame, and if his frame is solid, she will eventually adjust to it, or she will leave. Both outcomes are acceptable. What is not acceptable is abandoning his reality to live inside hers. Begin to move as if your time is the most valuable resource in the room, because it is. When she demands an immediate response, an immediate explanation, and an immediate emotional reaction, refuse to operate on her timeline. Respond when you are ready. Respond when you have decided what is true. This is not about punishing her. It is about refusing to be rushed out of your frame. The man who reacts immediately, who jumps to accommodate her emotional urgency, has signaled that her frame governs the interaction. The man who takes his time, who responds with calm and clarity on his own schedule, has signaled that his frame is sovereign. Refuse to apologize for things you do not believe you did wrong. This is perhaps the most difficult, because the culture has trained you to believe that apologies are currency, that they buy peace, that they demonstrate emotional intelligence. But an apology for something you do not believe is an act of self-abandonment. It is a lie you tell to make someone else comfortable, and every lie you tell splits you further from yourself. If you have genuinely harmed someone, if you have acted outside your own values, then apologize with full sincerity. But if you are apologizing simply to end her discomfort, to avoid conflict, to smooth over a moment where she is upset, but you are not wrong, you are training her to see you as a man who will betray his own reality to manage her moods, and that man will never be respected. Allow her to react while you remain the unmoved center. This is the core practice. She will test you. She will withdraw, accuse, provoke, and question. This is not pathology. This is instinct. She is asking if you are real, if your frame is solid, if you are a man whose reality exists independently of her approval. And your answer is not in your words. It is in your immovability. You let her test, you let her react, and you do not move. You do not defend, you do not chase. You remain exactly where you were, grounded in your mission, your values, your frame. And if she is a woman capable of respect, she will eventually stop testing and start resting, because she has discovered that she cannot move you. And that immovability is the only foundation on which real attraction can be built. There are two futures ahead of you, and the choice between them is being made right now in how you respond to the next test, the next provocation, the next moment where you feel the urge to explain yourself. The first future is the one where you ignore everything you have heard here, where you continue to believe that reaction is strength, that explanation is communication, that defending yourself is protecting yourself. In this future, 5 years from now, you are smaller. You have explained yourself into irrelevance. The woman you loved, or the woman you wanted to love, is gone, and you cannot articulate why. You did everything right. You were kind. You were vulnerable. You communicated, and somehow it was not enough. The respect drained away, and you are left with the hollow confusion of a man who played by the rules and lost anyway. You will blame her. You will blame the culture. You will blame dating apps, feminism, and modernity, and you will not be entirely wrong, but you will still be alone. Because you never learned the law that governs all of this. You never learned that the man who reacts has already lost. The second future is harder. It is lonelier at first. It requires you to sit with discomfort, to allow people to be wrong about you, to let women test you without rushing to pacify them. It requires you to prioritize your mission over her moods, your frame over her approval, your sovereignty over her comfort. This will feel selfish. It will feel cold. It will feel like you are risking everything. But 5 years into this path, you are not smaller. You are clearer. Fewer people are in your life, but the ones who remain respect you. Fewer women want you, but the ones who do want you, you have stopped explaining yourself. You have stopped defending. You have stopped living in other people's frames. And in the space that creates, you have found something most men never touch. The quiet, immovable gravity of a man who does not need anyone's permission to exist. If you ignore this, you will continue to lose in ways you cannot name. You will wake up one day and realize that your life belongs to other people, that your frame has been so thoroughly collapsed that you no longer remember what it felt like to have one. You will be kind, you will be fair, you will be right, and you will be irrelevant. If you answer this, if you take this as the initiation it is meant to be, you will lose things too. You will lose relationships that were built on your reactivity, on your willingness to live inside someone else's reality. You will lose the validation of people who only respected you when you were manageable. But you will gain the only thing that matters. You will gain yourself back. You will move through the world as a man whose reality does not require defense, whose frame does not bend under questioning, whose presence feels like architecture because it is not built on anyone's approval. And that, finally, is power. Not the kind that needs to announce itself, the kind that simply is. Here is what Machiavelli knew, what every man who has held real power understands, what the culture will never tell you because it cannot afford for you to know. The man who reacts has already placed the terms of his existence outside himself. He has agreed that someone else gets to decide whether his reality is valid. And once you have agreed to that, once you have entered the game of defending yourself, you have lost the only thing that mattered. You have lost frame. A man who reacts to every test, every provocation, every challenge to his reality, trains the world to see him as something that can be moved. And what can be moved cannot be respected. It can be tolerated, it can be managed, it can even be loved. But it cannot be respected, and without respect, everything else is hollow. She does not kill your frame. She reveals its absence. This is the mirror line, the one you must hold up to yourself without flinching. Every time you feel the need to explain yourself, every time you defend your reality as if it requires her approval, every time you react to her provocation as if it has the power to define you, you are confessing that your frame was never sovereign to begin with. She is not the problem, she is the revealer. And the question is not whether she will stop testing you. The question is whether you will finally become the kind of man who does not need to pass her tests, because his reality exists whether she agrees with it or not. If this landed somewhere inside you, if it named something you have felt but could not articulate, then do not let it dissolve back into the noise. Share it with the men who need it. Subscribe if you want more of this work to reach the people it was built for, and understand that this is not entertainment. This is a map, and the territory it describes is the only one that leads to the life you actually want. The man who reacts loses, even when he is right. The man who holds the frame keeps everything, even when he says nothing. That is the law. And you cannot negotiate with a law. You can only learn to live by it, or keep breaking yourself against it until there is nothing left to break.